We're going to start again with our featured readers for tonight, starting with our poetic opener, Joey Scarfone. Joey is a multimedia artist, and he makes me laugh a lot. So we're really pleased to have him here. His latest releases are a CD of spoken word over music and a chapbook. His work has been published in Monday Magazine and fleasonthedog.com. His column, entitled Midnight Fiction, will be coming out in issue 12 of For Fleas on the Dog in September, which is now.
It's out.
It's out. Please, let's welcome Joey Scarfone.
Good evening. I would just like to talk a minute about Fleas on the Dog. I'll check my time here. They're not a mainstream magazine, and the material is edgy. They publish everything from plays, fiction, lots of poetry, and they've been publishing their poetry for 2 years, and I've been their Goodwill ambassador, and now they've kicked me up. I'm now a contributing editor, and so my first column has been published this month, just came out, and it is called Midnight Fiction, as is my chapbook, Zoomers. And this is my CD called Shadow Culture, which is spoken word over music. It was a collaboration with a friend. And I'm going to start with one I wrote called The Crucifixion. Precious blood from a broken heart. It'll take some time to get over this one. The Romans had balcony seats for the first 3 acts, front row center for the crucifixion. This was the plan from the very start, but only God knew it. I was sent to earth to die for the sins of man. Dear Father, I think I blew it. Jesus looked down at his mother. This is how it goes, Mom, when you're ahead of your time. I gave them miracles, but that wasn't enough. I almost had them convinced when I did the Sermon on the Mount gig. It seemed like they were ready for a change, but those damn Romans just didn't go for the peace and love thing. Maybe someday they will, but right now they're more into conquering and pillaging. The thief on the right looked over his shoulder. Not a very good way to go for someone of your stature, Jesus. I mean, I'm just a thief, but you could have afforded a better lawyer. Well, believe it or not, this was all planned. No sense wasting money on a lawyer when you know the outcome would be the same. My father thought it would be better to have a life of poverty and humility. Just goes to show you, even God makes mistakes. I'll see you on the other side, brother. Jesus raised his head to the sky. Forgive them, Father. They know not how to make a cappuccino, and perished. Mary wept for Jesus as she took her only son down from the cross. My boy, my boy. The other Mary, Mary Magdalene, was also at the funeral. She consoled Jesus' mother. He was a good man and never mistreated me. We had fun before he decided to try and save the world. That was a big mistake. I wanted to get married and have kids, but he said he couldn't. He had a different destiny. Now he's gone. Jesus' human father, Joseph, never even came to the funeral. He had deserted Mary years ago. The Immaculate Conception was one thing, but he couldn't stay in a marriage with no physical intimacy. History didn't judge him, it just wrote him out of the script. The legend lives on in so many ways, it's hard to know the truth. Jesus had 33 years and a pretty decent youth. Someday Jesus is going to come back and give it another try. I hope he does, because I think he was cool, and I'd like to meet the guy. Continuing on in the theme of Jesus, this one's called Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Jesus wore leather that night, and Mary wore a miniskirt, very, very tight. They had come a long way from Nazareth to the bright lights of Rome, a long way from Babylon, a long way from home. David Bowie flew in from Japan, or so the papers said. He just couldn't miss a party like this, so he decided to come back from the dead. Never shy of the spotlight, they really lit up the town. David, Jesus, and Mary Magdalene really knew how to get around. They drew a crowd wherever they went, and record sales were great. From the Sistine Chapel to the Big Apple, the media just couldn't wait. One miracle followed the other, but the politicians weren't impressed. Jesus in his leathers and Mary in her cute little dress. Jesus was definitely out of control. He was getting too much power from his rock and roll. His fans adored him while the clergy deplored him. What would they do with their soul? Now, Jesus and Mary Magdalene had to cover their tracks. Their following grew, and so did their crew. They needed security to watch over their backs. David had left for Amsterdam. See, the end was near. Jesus and Mary were close to his heart, but they wouldn't last a year. Everyone went for Jesus when they saw what was done to him. Turning water into wine was just too big a sin. They should have stayed in Nazareth and simply settled down, but Jesus and Mary Magdalene were a very thorny crown. Those two are on my CD. And this is from my book called Jaded Dinosaurs. There's a whole story behind that, but for another time. This one is called Moments. Moments of happiness strung like pearls on silk thread, knotted between each bead to protect their delicate skin. Moments of the seasons, the smell of spring, the warmth of summer, the colors of fall, the bitter cold of winter. Moments of healing when the spirit needs to be stronger than the body, when the dark landscapes of the soul prevail, when we are reduced to hope. Moments of a full life, the hunger of youth, the struggle of midlife, the acceptance of old age. Moments of happiness are strung like pearls. And the last one I'll do is called The Crows. And this is also on the CD, put to metal music. They sit on the hydro wires like punk rockers in the cheap seats at a concert. Fashion isn't their thing. No pretty colored feathers or sweet songs. They wear black leather and black leather only. Their song is a raunchy blues with a smoker's cough. That's why I like the Crows. No pretenses. You won't see them gliding up to some silly bird feeder like those social climbing sparrows. They'll eat leftover pizza from last night's hockey game. No wonder they don't have the energy to migrate. Instead, they brave the winter in their skinny jackets, huddling together like street-smart ethnic gangs. Body heat is all they need. I admire crows. They're tough. They can survive in the city or the jungle. Same difference. It's just survival. We'll never see a crow immortalized on a coin or a stamp. There won't be a portion of wetland set aside for their preservation because they don't need the advertising. They're already famous. Refusing to become extinct, they dictate their terms to evolution. Pick on the spotted owl, stick it to the bald eagle, but don't mess with us crows. We are here forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. Do you have books and CDs for sale?
I have books, I have chapbooks, I have one book left, and I have several CDs.
Okay, so if you want to hear more, they're at that table. So now I have the great pleasure of introducing Joanna Liao, who's come to us from Saskatchewan. She's an associate professor at the University of Saskatchewan. Her essays, fiction, and poetry have been published in Brook, Catapult, Evergreen Review, The Goose, Isle, The Kindling, The Town Crier, QLRS, and Ricepaper Magazine. She grew up in Singapore and currently lives on Treaty 6 territory, Saskatoon. Seas Move Away is her first book. Meditating on exile, loss, diaspora, authoritarian law, and altered ecologies, Joanne Leow's debut collection spans from the would-be Eden of hyperplanned and surveilled Singapore to an uneasy settling in the Canadian prairies, seeking answers to the question of what is lost in intensive urban development and the journey across continents. Seas Move Away asks what we owe each other across borders and what endures in times of great flux and irreversible ecological change. Sounds really interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nancy. And thanks as well to Zoe for organizing everything. It's been a real pleasure listening to everybody read. This is such a wonderful thing that you have every month. I wish Saskatoon had more of this. So thanks so much again to the organizers of Planet Earth Poetry. I'd also like to acknowledge the, oh no, I'm good. Okay. Hi everyone in Zoom land. I'd also like to acknowledge the funding that I received from the University of Saskatchewan to make this trip. I'm really pleased to have my husband here with me. He's right there. Thank you, husband. And also my sons are holding down the fort at home and hopefully not burning the house down. Yes. So I just also like to acknowledge that a lot of this work was done on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. I've been in Saskatchewan for 6 years now and just learned so much about the land from elders, community members, and this is reflected in some of the poetry here. So hopefully you see that. I'm going to read you a selection. I have about 20-25 minutes. That's true. Thanks, Zoe. So I want to start off by reading the first poem in the collection just to sort of get you into the work. Seas Move Away is dedicated, well, to everybody who's, it says there in the epigraph, it's dedicated to everyone for those who move away. So definitely it's about diaspora, but it's also a kind of reflection on what home is and what home can be and kind of difficult and complicated relationships that we have at home, as I'm sure many of us do. So the first poem is called National Day, and it's for my master's supervisor, Philip Holden, who was a British man who lived in Singapore for 27 years and then was very, very suddenly told to leave for reasons unknown except by the state. So National Day for Philip. To you who know no other city and you who left decades before me, to you returned, rejected, condemned, censored, trapped. To you non-citizens in and out of borders, to you with bittersweet relationships with the land, always trying to explain why, even as I never ask. Because I was different. Because I couldn't breathe. Because I saw something. Because I saw nothing. To you everywhere. So the first part of the book, it's called Tides as Waves, and it is about Singapore. And has anyone been to Singapore? Oh, wow, look at the 3 people in the audience, aside from my husband. So just so you know, it's not all Crazy Rich Asians, the film, okay? Right? I have a lot of students coming up to me, Professor Liao, I watched Crazy Rich Asians. I know so much about Singapore now. I'm like, so essentially, it's had one political party in power since it became independent in 1965, before that as well. So you can imagine what that concentration of power does. So a lot of the poems in this book are thinking through the kind of violence of decolonization and the kind of authoritarian power that is involved in Singapore. So it's a really sort of unknown history, I think, outside Singapore, but there were detentions without trial, some even up to 32 years. There was some torture. There were exiles, deportees. So it's not something that you usually hear with regards to Singapore, and something that this poetry collection, I try to sort of excavate even through. So one of the things is that the spaces in Singapore are very, very planned, and everything is sort of, planned like years in advance. So there's this space that I write about called City Gallery Singapore. And you can visit the City Gallery in Singapore, and it will have a 2-scale map of every single building and neighborhood. And it's just like I would say it's the size of 2 pool tables, and it's all done there. The buildings are really cute. And there's this little sign that says, "You are here," right? So this is what this poem's about. City Gallery, Singapore. This island has its own intimate weight. This road running down the center is its central artery, its tree-lined spine. I want to know its watery heart, all its old depositories, its forgotten views. Let me be miniaturized and frozen in this model, made to scale, with its tiny sign indicating, "You are here." I will trace the fickle arc of progress, the pain and pleasure of its geographies, symmetrical, architectural, guttural. Breathe in the dust and the constant constructions, the upturned red earth. Touch the calloused hands carrying concrete, bricks, rebar. Listen to the pile driving, filling my head and chest, my bones disinterred by the demolitions. So part of the collection is also thinking about all this sort of public space and politics of it, and then relating it to the kind of poetics of family life. So a lot of my family is still in Singapore. And this past year, I lost my grandmother and my mother, which was really difficult during COVID because like going back and forth and traveling, right? So this next poem is for my grandmother, who was born in 1922 and lived until she was 99. She was a really tough lady, not always the most politically correct, very, very tough. So this is in her voice. Essentially it's a translation from the Chinese dialect of things that she was telling me in her last days. Grandmother and inventory. I'm already a dead person. Burn it all, the jewels, the lesser diamonds. Do you want this bolt of cloth? I've given away so much, almost all of it. What can I take with me? Did I tell you I wanted to be buried in this? I don't remember that conversation. Someone has been through my things. They've taken something. That bracelet, my wedding rings, the purse of money, this pendant. Take it. I've had it since I was a little girl. You can't buy jade like this anymore. Please take the sewing machine. Do you want it? Here is the cover I made. I'd like you to bathe me. Or ask the lady who came the other day, isn't she coming back? I don't know her name. When it is brighter, after we have breakfast, I'd like you to open the safe again. It's been so long. Take out every box, lay it all on the bed. Unzip every pouch, open every container. In the light, we'll be able to see. All right, Grandma. So if you get the book, the second part of the book is called All Submerged Lands. And it involves these poems that are found poems from the statutes of Singapore. And a lot of the statutes and laws from Singapore actually come from the British Penal Code, which, so we share a lot of the laws that were taken, that have been implemented in India, the rest of the Commonwealth as well. Possibly part of Canada, I'm assuming. And so I was thinking really about the violence inherent in these words that try to contain all this power and try to imagine, sort of control in a way. So in the particular poem that I'm writing about called Public Order Includes, I'm looking at a particular law called the Public Order Act, which the government put into place trying to prevent public assembly in Singapore. So in Singapore, an assembly of one person protesting is still a protest, and an illegal one if you don't get a license. So just have that in context. Public order includes, permit me to declare my place in this procession in the prohibited area. to interpret what you mean when you say, I organize, I take part in. Where is this regulated place? Where is this unrestricted area? Can I give you advance notice? I'm waiting for you to prescribe how this demonstration by a person alone is a demonstration carried on by a person by himself. Are you an authorized officer? Are you a public nuisance, an obstruction in any public road? Here is my location, date, and time, my number of persons, my purpose, and other such particulars. Permit me to declare. Sorry, it's just angry. It's all going to be angry and sad. I'm really sorry. Okay, so one of the things that I really noticed, thinking about reading in Victoria, and it was how much I miss the sea living in Saskatchewan. And having grown up in an island, I really, especially during COVID when I couldn't travel, miss the sea so much. And the first thing we did when we got to the high hotel, the floor that we were staying, was open the window and smell the sea. So this particular poem is called Four Shores Act Singapore, and it's about the act of what the Singapore government calls reclaiming the land from the sea. And so what's really interesting is that the sand and the aggregate that we take to make Singapore larger, 25% larger since independence, comes from the river estuaries and other islands from the regional neighbors. So I like to think about it as a kind of occupation, but you're taking someone's land really, but you're not occupying them. It's really kind of strange. So this is some of the work that I do in the research in my day job. But whatever can't come out there and all the feelings I have about this strange process comes out in the poetry. So this is called Four Shores Act Singapore, Chapter 113, Original Enactment Consolidated Ordinance 8 of 1872. So you can see it's in colonial law. Ordinance 1 of 1901 and Ordinance 10 of 1912, revised edition 1985. Words to make land by. Reclamations, validations, facilitations, foreshores, and all submerged lands. Granularity of sand includes messuages, tenements, hereditaments, any space you might want to live in of any tenure. Ports, quays, wharves, jetties, flotsam, and other jetsam we choose to jettison into the sea. No person shall be entitled, no action of proceeding against, no compensation for these interests. My feet that touch the seabed, that swim in this tidal river, that channel, my body, those minerals, my blood, coral, stone, clay, sand, gravel, brine, petroleum, mineral oil, words to include every consequence. Nothing in this act is dangerous, is derogation of our power, our rights, our territory. Okay, so how much time do I have left? Okay, some time. I'm going to read you a couple poems about Saskatchewan. And when I started writing about Saskatchewan, I thought to myself, who am I to write about Saskatchewan in the midst of all these people who lived there for generations or millennia? But I've had the privilege of sitting with the Métis elder, Maria Campbell, in a sort of monthly reading series that she would do. She called it like a circle of wisdom and storytelling. And she said, if you don't write about it and no one else writes about it, who will write about it? So, I hope I'm doing some of that justice. This poem is called Lake. This country seems so placid. It wears its past so lightly. Here we learn of septic tanks, private beaches, full year arrangements of campers. But do we know what histories are interred in the enclosure of fields, the songs of birds, the sediment on the shores of this lake? I'm going to read you a poem that I wrote about teaching English, which is always really sort of interesting when people ask me, why did you go to Saskatchewan? Was it mining? Was it potash? Was it extraction? And I'm like, no, I went to teach English literature. And then they kind of look at me and then I go, I went to teach all the writers who were not dead and not white. That's why they hired me. It's just, it just says everything. So this poem is called Rubric. My futile work is to stem this broken down chorus of the imperial language, its rules thrown to the wind, shattered by so many other tongues, tracing the journeys made by bureaucrats, governors, planners, destroyers, colonialists, explorers, missionaries, ignorance. All the words spoken by those in three-piece suits ill-suited for the climate, high-necked, grubby white cassocks and habits, making inroads not just in the interiors of continents, in smallish or vast archipelagos, but also in the folds, synapses, and cords, throats constricted, tongues tamed, palate, teeth subjected, objected, rejected. How much has been lost? Love songs, dissent, passion, metaphors, and all manner of stories in other ways of making sounds to express beauty, dying, hunger. Spell it this way. Conjugate, synthesize, syntax, agitate, place the punctuation, grammatically integrate your protest here. Write of grief, memory with the most elegant and violent of phrasings. Don't repeat that clause. Look out for patterns. Can you see the traces of others in your writing, in their writing, in my voice, my mouth, that will never be yours? I can tell you to break it, make it new, but these rules adhere to us like weights, like bells, like stones. Who made them? On whose backs? Whose authority? Son of, daughter of, child of, which rebellion, revolution, invasion, occupation, genocide? Each word insufficient to account for it all. This next poem is about COVID. Sorry, I went as COVID poem. This is my COVID poem from Saskatchewan. It's not cheerful, okay, just in case you're wondering. Dispatch from SK. We are having a mass casualty event every day now for the foreseeable future. The numbers we intone shorthand for the toll. In the air we breathe, a siren on a distant street, a crowded hospital car park glimpsed from the road. Do the math. It's curves, exponents, factors. Bodies are evacuated from this, the disaster zone, province where we can't care for our own, can't keep them breathing, can't keep them alive long enough to open another bed for the endless tide of the sick. Anonymous deaths, an age range, a location. So this poem is for my sons, who are not here, but always makes it awkward when they're in the room. They don't want to listen to my poetry, so it's fine. The title of this poem comes from my favorite Chinese supermarket in Saskatoon. And when I first moved there weren't that many, but now they're all over, and I'm so excited because I can cook anything I want. So it's great. Market of Asia. One day when I'm old, you will take me here in the cold. I will thread my arms through yours. My sons, I will be so much smaller then, but still I will search the aisle for a jar, a bottle, a plastic packet containing a memory that refuses to leave, something that a parent or grandparent once tended to on a stove. I will grasp for the tenuous, the half-remembered, the snatches, my nose to a prickly fruit, tongue to a sample spoon. The seasons and festivals will go on without me, older than I ever will be, and more distant. I have only what I learned in books, secondhand, cut by repeated diasporas. I will have taught you the last of the forgotten tones of my mother's Penang tongue, my father's Teochew accent subsumed in it, the Hakka woman who cared for a tiny version of myself, always hovering on my lips. We will reminisce about childhood trips back to the heat of the past, the aunties and uncles unrelated by blood who were kind to us, who cooked all that was good, who called you handsome, foreign, other. We will never be able to return. Let's see, how much more time do I have? Like some time?
So 8:45 now.
Okay, maybe like a couple more. All right, you guys okay?
Yeah.
Doing all right? All right. I'm gonna read. So this poem was inspired by the poet Joanne Arnott, who looked at an early version of my manuscript, and she said to me, "If you're going to write poems about seas and bodies of water in Singapore and Asia, you need to write a poem about seas in Saskatchewan." That's like really hard. Like this challenge she threw me. She was like, write a poem about seas in Saskatchewan. I'm just like, hey. So it turns out you have to just go back really far in geological time, as geographers will know, and think back millennia, more than that, when all of Saskatchewan was actually under kind of lush tropical sea. right, called the Western Interior Seaway. So this poem is called Western Interior Seaway with gratitude to Joanne Leow. From the air, I can almost see it. Believe that the lights of the houses are those of ships set against dark waters. I recall other night landings, my home islands surrounded by oil tankers glutted with barrels of crude. Here, though, traces are deeply buried, veins of potash and oil, thick pink salts, black slurry, the substances of death and life, shaping the politics of this bone-dry land deep in the lungs of those insisting all pleasures and rights are linked to mining out all that remains. All this used to be tropical, lush, green, humid, warm, a shallow, wide, salty body of water, now buried beneath the centuries of suburban and rural life. Ruination, occupation, dams, railways, asphalt, pipes, gas lines, sewage. Memory must descend. This is a poem for my husband. Not awkward at all. He was asking me why I don't write more poems about him, and then I said to him, I only write poems about problems, hence exes, not like 20-year-old marriages. Should I say some more? No, I shouldn't. I should just read the poem. This poem is called Knowing. Surgeons are like lovers, but they cut too deep. They lay you open with their tools. I want to pry my way gently past your skin, epidermis, subcutaneous layers, nerve, cord, bone. He uses the word conjoined, like the twin you had who didn't survive. I think of your nerves, entwined, umbilical, confounding textbooks, case studies. How little can lovers tell from brushing up against flesh, tentative and glancing. Can't say I don't write about you. Okay, so I think I'm going to read maybe 2 more poems. This poem is about the kind of conflation of like relationships and exile. It's called Old Lover. My skin anticipates your humid breath as I step out of the airport. Have you been smoking again, drinking again? You were always too soused on your own success. All those button-down shirts hiding your capacity for amnesiac benders. You're fatal, I know, a terminal case, although unceasingly ravenous. Take me to all our old haunts, those sticky bars, late nights in sodium-lit parks, long rides along the disappearing coastline, untidy, out-of-the-way eating houses. Nobody else will be there. So much of my body still belongs to you. The cells nourished by all those meals you fed me, all slick with animal fat, fermented spirits, spoonful after spoonful of rice, white, softened with broth made from boiling bones for hours. You turn these morsels, these words against me. What I want you to be will never exist. Old lover, you can't change. It's been too long. We have the same conversations, repeat the same names, laugh at the same punchlines, your insular accent deepening with each year. Okay, so I'm going to read you a very, very short selection from one of the last bits of the poem, poetry book collection. And it's in a section called Foreshores. And I consulted the Canadian title manual when I was writing this book. I don't understand it. It's extremely technical, but in its poetry, in its writing, I found poetry. So I'm just going to quote the epigraph to this section. It's very technical. Since the observed tide consists not of a single wave, but of the superposition of many tide waves of different frequency and amplitude, it will never fit exactly any of our simple descriptions. So I thought that was just really beautiful that you can't describe the tides. You can't describe a wave because they come, you know, I was just thinking of migrations and multiple movements and how everything gets so complex, right? So there's a longer poem called Foreshore, and this is section 2. The tide wraps itself around these rocks and these bracken ferns like a luminous cloak. The containers are empty. All your words are ciphers. The foreshore is littered with these empty shells, these carcasses, these mother of pearl remains. Tell me what meaning can be extracted if the water flows out from the city, but the sea washes it back. How does memory work? It is of inlets, of coves, of false creeks, how the sound of water changes my mind, the unlikely existence of these hard steel bars painted over in red, the sides of these ships that say Pacific Basin, and the salt wind that refuses to be recorded. So if you want to see the rest of it, you have to buy the book. All right, I'm going to read you the final poem, which is the titular poem of the collection, Seas Move Away. And Seas Move Away actually comes from a quotation from The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje. And the quote reads, "Seas move away, so why not lovers?" Oh, Ondaatje. Seas move away, so heartbreak pales in the backdrop of desertification, hurricanes, war, histories of violence, what unspeakable things we do to each other with sharpness and heat. Crossings are irrevocable when bodies of water themselves prove elusive and changeable. Seas move away, and so do the ports that call for my arrival at the predetermined times, turn out to be too far from the coast. I cannot find the island of my birth if its libraries burn. Words mean so little that their worth cannot be guaranteed, even as they pass unchanged from the tips of fingers through these undersea cables into the air, rearranging the rare earth minerals in this illuminated glass that I hold in my hand. Seas move away and leave debris in their wake, coral bleaches, wrecks of the past, blooms of jellyfish, beached whales dragged up from their submarine dives. I stand on these shores and watch how the blues change from calm to undecided to fury. The tide pulls me out and knocks me over, breathless in the foam. Thank you.